Hi, welcome. My name is Dale McCluskey, and on this video, it's part of my series called Flipping the Script. I'm going to be doing a multi-part series while using a video put out by Adam Spivey of South End Dog Training in the UK as the video I'm going to use to respond by way of, again, answering the question, talking about what represents a defines training once a relationship problem is underway between a dog and owner. And the title of this video is Clicker Training for Reactive Dogs. And this is where, again, you see a lot of individuals out there, trainers who identify as, balanced dog trainers. I talk about this, who advocate training as a learning-based exercise, just like force-free dog trainers. And again, I talk about the problems in the dog training world, the confusion, all the the divisiveness, the back and forth with these groups of trainers, and the confusion by way again of why it is that so many dog owners continue to struggle and fail within these systems of training, within these approaches that advocate training this way, by way of using typically treats to get a dog to respond when a relationship problem is already underway. And while these trainers assume that those superficial responses can be trusted, representing that good things are happening. And again, I talk about that this couldn't be further from the truth for so many dogs and owners. Trainers who are just focused on responses and again, a very appearance focused way, assuming that the typical sit, the down, the come, the stay within 5 minutes of entering a training environment, that that those represent that the relationship or how you're perceived is changing. And again, this is inherently flawed. And I talk about this. I talk about the criteria that represents a process. I talk about influence and control. Okay, how that's defined at the social level in terms of, again, dogs as pack animals, and how those core ingredients are reconciled through a intentional interaction based approach that takes the path of approaching training for what it truly represents, based on the fact that you're experiencing a relationship problem with your dog, as a intervention. So as soon as I use the word intervention, that means it changes the focus of what training represents. It shines a light on your role differently, in a good way, because again, it's about connection. Understand that when I talk about the core ingredients, it isn't about being abusive, it isn't about being over the top, but at the same time, you have to be able to reconcile the reactions of dogs properly. Because here's the thing: once a dog gains a lot of control in the relationship, even dealing with, say, an aggressive dog, you're going to get higher reactions, okay, to leadership, to control. And so that can trigger off, based again on all the confusion out there, because everything's appearance focused. People just assume that there's physical harm coming onto the dog. The reason that reaction's happening is because it must be because you're being overly physical with the dog, and that simply, in the majority of cases, simply isn't the case at all. It's relationship. Okay, so the dog isn't going to like, okay, the fact that you're advocating control when they're in control. Okay, so becomes a type of a power play scenario. But again, what I show is it's a type of power play when done the right way, that the dog comes into agreement with. Okay, so you're able to move forward in a way in which you're going to have a predictable, intentional outcome, versus here, okay, we talk about, superficial response using treats versus a picture change, which is more often than not a counterfeit picture, which cannot be trusted. Dogs will look fantastic. Based on your emotional connection, you'll feel really good about, okay, using treats. I talk about this, how these trainers have the kind of like the home field advantage, based again on this idea, and the fact that the reason that many dog owners are experiencing problems is because they're connected with their dogs at a highly emotional level. Okay, so understand it's about depth of relationship. Your role is critical. Your emotional state, how you connect that way in terms of emotion, that plays a tremendous role. That is, again, that will transfer into the relationship in a way in which it causes problems. Okay, dogs gaining a level of control in the relationship, understanding that it's depth. Dogs are amazing animals, but you have to come to an understanding of what that connection represents. So here again, I'm gonna do a multi-part series. I'm gonna use this video as a framework. Okay, so here, this isn't about focusing in on Adam Spivey in a way in which it's meant to be personal. This is a public video. This is for education purposes. So, I'm offering a perspective, okay, insight into what clicker training represents. Again, clicker training, you hear, this term used in the dog training community. I've done actually another video on clicker training by way of Victoria Stillwell. This is going to be more in depth because I'm actually going to get into use this as a framework to actually have more of a lengthy discussion. So again, I'm going to keep this within like a 20-minute parts as we go through. Similar to what I did with my other video series as I go through. And so again, it's about insight, understanding, and when you go on social media, you're looking for answers. You're going to encounter a lot of this, a lot of information about trainers who are just working off people's emotions. It's going to look really good. It's going to feel really good. But the question is it really good? And in a lot of cases, no, it's not. It's very deceptive. And this is why people will cycle through all this balanced training, force-free training, and still be struggling in the relationship with their dog. So I'm going to play some of this. Again, when I talk about clicker training, and what it involves is, again, we'll talk about this marking a response. You're going to hear that word marking a behavior. You're going to hear that word behavior. I talk about that a lot, how that word is misapplied, okay, within the framework of what this idea represents, based on how these trainers are engaging a relationship problem, the responses themselves, which are very superficial. And so they use that when they bring that word behavior in, understand they're trying to suggest something's happening that's really not. Okay, and we'll talk about that because again, that's why I talk about the parenting example a lot as well in my videos, help people understand it's very similar in terms of your role, in terms of relationship and outcomes.
Dog reacting, because every time you go out, you're beginning to dread walks. Your dog's stressed, you're stressed, nobody's having fun.
So we talk about stress right away. Stop it quickly. I've mentioned this in some other videos. This issue about reactivity. Okay, and this is where it's a cautionary tale because, understand emotion is a big deal. Okay, your emotions can really cause problems in the relationship. You want to reconcile them through leadership. Okay, so think about connection, depth of connection. That's where it's really going on when it comes to fulfillment in terms of, really gaining everything you want in the relationship. So it's about meeting your needs, meeting your dog's needs. And so we get this thing about stress, the stress is coming from the fact that this relationship is already going sideways. Okay, so the stress comes onto the dog. It's what happens because it's like your dog is caught in between two worlds. Okay, in terms of bringing the dog into your environment, you're controlling your dog at a certain level, just for the fact that they're in your environment, and so there's aspects of influence and control already happening. And so the problem is in terms of your role itself, if your role isn't defined properly, okay, to line it all up, where, in terms of leadership, okay, it's going to bring a stress load, confusion, a stress load onto your dog because your dog's basically saying, what's going on here? My human, okay, my human owner is connecting with me in a way which is very emotionally driven. And so that starts to create a problem because that starts to be transferred into a relationship, interpreted as weakness. Okay, and that's not a good thing because then you're going to start the stress loads are going to start coming onto your dog. This is where you get into this issues of fear aggression, which is, seems like a contradiction. How can a dog be fearful and aggressive within seconds Well, that's the point. It's not really fear that way. It's stress. Okay. And then, control's being expressed, it's manifesting, you get moments of aggression, and that's where bad things happen. And then but the problem is when you use this thing about, fear, when you hear these trainers use words like, dog fearful, ask yourself the question, what does that generate in with the human that's already, connected at a very emotional level with their dog? It's gonna generate more emotion, right? Because it's like your response is just like wanting to comfort a child that's in distress is empathy, emotion, right? And that again, that can work to provide comfort for a small child, infant. But when it comes to nature and dogs, that is like it's reverse. Okay, it's gonna generate more stress, more problems in the relationship, and so you have to understand that you have to think different. Okay, and there's a trust aspect there where you have to trust, what I'm saying, information, but this is where you have to take small steps towards that because I know it's a very challenging thing for someone to move from a highly emotional level of connection with their dog to start to advocate leadership. But the problem here is you have trainers like Spivey who are out there saying, well, you don't really, the messaging, oh, you really don't have to change your emotional connection. You can advocate through using treats. And so, because understand that when you start to engage that way using treats and, this type of the themes I talk about in terms of bribery, accommodation, negotiation, it'll offer up a picture that appears like change is happening and it's really not. Okay, this is what gets people in a lot of trouble because it really leads in this messaging that you as a dog owner, you really don't have to bring leadership in the way that it needs to come in. You don't have to bring your dog under a level of intentional control and influence. You don't have to follow the path of a approaching the relationship in terms of what it represents, a intervention. That you can trust appearances that way, that you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. And this is the problem in the dog training world. I understand that a lot of trainers are doing this. And then it's what I call the scenario of displaced blame, where you're in the training environment, you're feeling really good about everything, your dog's moving around, and these trainers are selling this counterfeit picture. And then you go home and it's like you're still frustrated because the relationship hasn't actually gotten better at all. And then you pick up the phone, you ask questions, and guess what these trainers will do is, well, give it more time. Um, then they go in this thing, well, it might be your dog is the problem. It's so easy to do because when you have this many trainers doing it, it seems normal. It's not normal. Understand this is, think about it. Does it seem normal? It's nature, right? You see dogs, when dogs come together, this stuff isn't happening. This type of collateral damage isn't happening. This is a human problem, okay? Based on bad information and not understanding how dogs connect through a dog's state of mind, okay, through the relationship. One of the big things I talk about is about being dialed into the relationship the right way. So these trainers are not dialed in that way. So they're taking responses at face value that they're not even engaging relationship problem properly to begin with by way of approaching it as a intervention. They're approaching it as a learning-based exercise where you're just using treats and you're motivating dogs to respond that way, and it's totally, totally sideways. Okay, it's not the way to go at all. And again, this is why the dog training world is really in bad shape, and this is happening a lot. So here you have a trainer talking about, okay, the clicker, which is based on, again, the setup is to motivate responses, to mark, you'll hear this, mark a behavior. You're not marking a behavior, okay, you're marking a response that more often than not is not doesn't represent change happening at all. Okay, so we have to kind of clear the air here when as I move forward here as to what's really happening. Okay, so you'll hear that word behavior mentioned a lot. Understand typically these are just superficial responses because here's the thing, the way to test, okay, whether or not the picture is not a counterfeit, okay, the only way that can happen is through the core ingredients I talk about, influence and control, coming through interacting with the dog in a way that's going to define, okay, the relationship, define the dog's state of mind. Okay, so that's how you gain the information. That's not what happens here. Okay, understand that. So this is why when you start doing this, you have no clue. Okay, just at the level that the dog is how much control that dog's holding throughout the entire process. And so when change does happen, I guarantee you, okay, it isn't because the clicker and the treats are doing anything. It's because influence and control are coming in some way. And typically it's the owner changing. Because a lot of times what happens too is people, before they even show up for training, are getting frustrated. Okay, they're already like, hey, I got to fix this. And so they're already starting to generate some influence into the relationship, the fact that they're upset. Okay, I talk about this. People tell me before I even show up at their house, there might be like a delay of a few days before I do a home visit the first session. Now come in and say, Dale, things are already changing, starting to in a positive way. And I can tell from their demeanor, but they've already have had it. Okay, they're already like frustrated, but what that transfer translates into is they're being more authoritative, not necessarily like mean or over the top, but they're more like focused. They're not petting as much. They're more driven by leadership, and that change part is what's happening already. So understand there's certain interplays here, certain relational dynamics that are part of everything, any process, anything you do. But the problem is these trainers they don't account for any of that. That's not what their focus is on. So this is why when you say that, why is it some people are successful, some fail, within certain approaches? Well, it's because of certain relationship dynamics that are in play that these trainers aren't focused on anyway. So the real problem is when they're defining success according on their terms, okay, according to what they're focused on, they're looking at just the response side of things. Okay, you're good to go as long as the dog you pull some treats, the dog is moving around, and we're going to talk about the context of agreeableness. Okay, why that's a problem as well. So understand there's so many things here that these trainers, when I have this conversation, they're not dialed into any of this at all, which is a major problem. Okay, because understand that the truth is what needs to happen is the process itself needs to be defined properly to guarantee, okay, to make sure that we're not going to end up with a counterfeit picture. That's the goal. So gonna end. This is part one. We haven't got we've got like 14 seconds in here, okay, but I really want to talk through all this. Okay, so anyone watching my videos, you can start to get a sense of what defines training and why you want to stay clear of certain ideas of things, but just any training system or any trainer, and I'm talking about the majority out there anyway, who approach a relationship problem as a learning-based exercise. Stay away from it. Stay away from it, okay? And we'll talk about that. But you can watch my videos. Got lots of great content on my channel. I have extra courses too. I want to mention that. Even if you're considering, hey, you know what? I've watched a lot of Dale's videos. I want to take it to the next level and be a trainer. You can do that. I actually have, you can check out my website. There's opportunity there to, be a trainer. You basically taking the system of training, helping other people, but you're your own person. So you're not tied in that way. You're your own person, but the support is there long term. So, but take a look at that. I have information on my website as well. So just want to mention that as well. And here's the thing: if you have questions as I go through the series, my FaceTime consult is available. So it's very reasonable. You get to talk to me for an hour. You can ask whatever questions you want to add more clarity to what I'm saying through the videos. Doesn't matter if you're a dog trainer, if you're a dog owner, look at the consult option, FaceTime consult. And that way, anywhere you are in the world, I can help you answer all your questions. So, but thanks for watching part one. Stay tuned for part two.